What's going on, everybody? In today's video, I'm going to be talking about how to properly sharpen a chainsaw. So let's get right into this. This right here, I believe this is a 30 or 32 inch chainsaw blade or bar that's on it. So to start out is I want to let you guys know that sharpening a chainsaw is not an easy thing at all. So here's the first things that you need to know. Typically, with most chainsaws that are on store shelves, such as a Husqvarna and a Steel, when you have a brand new chain, typically for the first 5 to 7 sharpening sessions, you're going to want to use a 3/16 file, and this is what the size looks like. Here's why. It's because when you have a brand new chain, the little hole spacing area that this file fits in between the tooth to sharpen it is smaller. Once you have your first 5 to 7 sharpens done on that new chain, you're going to want to switch to a 7/32 file. Okay? Now, let's talk about the basics on sharpening a chain. So, most of you that are watching this video think you might know how to sharpen a chainsaw and that you have it mastered and you're this big shot that knows what you're doing, but the truth of the matter is you really don't. Okay? And I've been a landscaper for almost 9 years, and I've dealt with them a lot. And I can tell you that throughout my landscaping career, there have been many times where I thought I had it down when I really didn't. There's just so many different variables in what it actually takes to sharpen a chainsaw. And so, needless to say, it's very, very hard to get it down. So, here's what you want to do. When you have a brand new chain, you want to examine the chain and remember about how the chain looks when you first get it. That's going to help you out a lot. You will notice that the teeth on the chain are very square. Very square. Now, let's see if I can show you some teeth on this saw. So, if you just take a look at a tooth, oh boy, right about here, you will notice that it has a pretty sharp point at the end. That is what you want. Now, if it gets to the point to where that arrow is gone, that is very bad. So, here's the thing that you want to do when you're sharpening. First of all, when you're operating a chainsaw, you always want to make sure you are in position to where you do not hit the dirt anywhere where you're cutting a piece of wood. What happens is, even if that chain hits the dirt just for a second or half of a second, it already dulls it quite a bit. it won't necessarily always make it to where it's just like dead dull, but as soon as you hit the dirt, you want to shut that thing off immediately and go over each and every last one of your teeth with your file. And if you're lucky and you didn't hit the dirt that bad, it's probably going to take you, I don't know, 6 or 7, maybe 10 strokes of smoothing out that tooth. Okay? So, also, when you are sharpening your chainsaw, usually when you're running your saw after you run out of gas or after so long goes by and you shut the saw off to go do something else, it's worth it to always take your saw to your truck and to do about 3 or 4 strokes, because when you're doing that, you're not keeping it sharp, you're not sharpening it necessarily, you're just keeping it sharp. So here's where it gets really difficult. Typically what you see with a lot of people that are struggling with sharpening a chainsaw is that when it's not cutting very well anymore, they will take it back to their truck and do 6 or 7 strokes on each tooth, not paying attention to if the teeth are squared off like they should be or rounded. If they are rounded, it is going to take a lot more strokes than you might think, like a lot more. So here's, for instance, like say your chain is dull. If you go back and you make sure those teeth are completely squared off to where they have the nice point at the end of them, you're going to be just fine. But if you're not paying close attention and you happen to do this 5 or 6 different times, every single time you sharpen it, your blade is just going to become more and more dull, and it's going to be harder and harder to get that blade sharpened, your chain. So let's say you have a blade that's fairly dull and it doesn't have that nice point, but it's not super rounded like this, but it's got an okay point, but it has a little bit of a round to it. When that happens, it's very likely that it's going to take you 15 to 20 strokes for each tooth if it's that dull. So a lot of people make the mistake in realizing just how much they need to take off that tooth in order to get it pointed again in a squared shape. Sharpening a chain is not an easy thing. So here is an example of what can make your blade go dull really fast. So like, let's say you're cutting a piece of wood and you happen to hit a rock or a piece of metal. What's most likely going to happen to your tooth is it's not just going to get dull, but you're going to chip it. Now, when you chip your tooth, you have to take so much off that tooth with your file in order to get it pointy again in that square position and not rounded. I hate to tell you guys this, but the fact of the matter is if you chip your tooth, it's probably going to take you like 40 strokes for every single tooth. And just depending on the severity, let's say you failed to get like 10 or 15 strokes on each tooth and you kept doing 6 or 7, and you now have a bunch of chipped teeth and you kept using the same principle of just doing 6 or 7 yada yada strokes on your chainsaw, and now you have severely messed up on sharpening your chain so bad that not only is your teeth, all of your teeth dull, but chipped. Not only that, but now the tooth is starting to go down in an arc like this, like a witch's claw. That is an extremely dull blade. You go from this to this to that. That is very bad. when you have that dull of a blade, it is probably going to take you upwards of 60 to 75 strokes per tooth. Okay? And I've actually spent that much time on a saw before when I had it so ridiculously dull. And if you have it that dull, it's probably going to take you an hour and 30 minutes, an hour and 45 minutes, maybe just 1 hour if you're really good at sharpening chainsaws like I am and have enough experience. Now, this information that I'm sharing with you guys, I can honestly tell you that it has not come easy at all. It has taken me literally just as long as I've been a landscaper for the entire duration of my career, which is 9 years, to be able to even make this video today to tell you guys all about it. So, when you are sharpening your chainsaw, here's what you want to do. You want to, oh boy, let's see what we got here with this camera. Right here, I don't know if you can see, but there is a line right here that you want to follow. So the line is going in a position that is like this. So you don't want to just stick your file in straight like this. You want to turn it to where it's going in the same direction as that line. And it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but you want to get it as close as possible. You see what I mean? So you don't want to just have it straight like a cross like this. You want to make sure that file is going in the same direction as that line. And if you're doing it correctly, you shouldn't have many issues on getting your tooth sharpened. It just takes a lot of patience. Now, let's talk a little bit more about a chipped tooth. First of all, when you have a very good tooth, it literally looks completely chromed out. And it is. It's just silver. Now, when you have a chipped tooth, you can noticeably see that there's an optical illusion and change of color on the tooth, and it almost looks like it's black. It doesn't matter if it takes you 30 or 40 or even 50 strokes to get that tooth knocked all the way back down to where it is completely square. Don't give up. Just keep at it with your strokes no matter what, and that tooth will get squared back up to where it's not rounded off anymore. Now, if you made it this far in this video, hang on and don't give up on watching it yet. There's many more fundamentals that I need to go over with you to try to master sharpening a chainsaw. So, let's say you have a dull blade and you are sharpening it just perfectly, right? And you have the file that's in the perfect angle, and it's not just like in a cross position with that chain. Sometimes you'll notice when you're doing strokes like this, wink, 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 you're doing it correctly, but you notice the tooth is not easily getting shaved down. Here's why. It's probably because your file is bad. You want to make sure you have many spare and fresh files on you when you're out on a job running a chainsaw, because they go dull very fast, believe it or not. I don't know this 100% from my own personal intuition, but according to my grandfather, most files that are issued in the US, they're not very good. They will work for like the first, 3 or 4 sharpens, maybe 5 or 6 if you're lucky, but they wear out fast. Now, if you can find German grade files, Those are very, very strong files. I've personally never used one, but they're tanks. So not only do you have to have your file in the correct position as that guideline, and not only do you have to get enough strokes to get your chain nice and sharp, but you also have to make sure the file is not bad, because it will not shave that tooth down easily unless you have a good file. So that is basically everything you need to know when it comes to sharpening the teeth. Just don't give up. Make sure you're holding that file in the perfect position and give it literally as many strokes as it takes until you can physically see that tooth get pointy again in a squared position to where it is no longer round. Like I said, it doesn't matter if it takes 20 strokes, 30, 40, 50, 60. To be realistic, if it's getting upwards of like 75, 80, or 90 strokes, it's probably not worth your time. It's best to just go buy another chain, a brand new one altogether, because that's going to save you a lot of time and hassle. But better for the next chain. Just pay attention to what you're doing. Don't hit the dirt. Although sometimes you can't avoid dirt because sometimes it's in between the wood and the bark, which happened to me just on Friday. Okay, so also when you're sharpening your teeth, make sure you are looking at the entire tooth from the top to the bottom. It's basically an entire C ring. You want the whole entire C to look very bright and sharp. You don't have to if you don't want to, but having the entire thing look really good and not only just the very tip of the blade sharpened is going to do you better. So let's move on to the Rakers. Now, the Rakers are a completely different story with the chainsaw. So let's see if I can show you guys here. So right here on this tooth, this right here is the tooth, and this little thing on the left is the raker. What the rakers do is they regulate how deep the tooth will cut into wood. So it is also very important that every single time you sharpen your chainsaw, you want to make sure that you're filing down your rakers with about 2 or 3 strokes every single time you sharpen your chainsaw. And to do that, you're going to want to use a flathead file, which looks a lot like this. See the difference? This is a round file, and then this is a flathead. Now, if you follow this advice that I'm giving you, and you make sure to hit those rakers 2 or 3 times after every single session of sharpening your teeth, you're going to have a lot better of a performing chainsaw. And so what happens is, let's say this is your tooth and this is your raker. The rakers generally hang lower than the tooth, and you want enough space between that tooth and the raker to where the raker's low enough to where you're going to give the tooth enough room to dig in to the piece of wood. If the raker is too high, like this, then when you're making your cuts, you're going to notice that there's a little, very small amount of sawdust that's coming out. There's not a lot of ripping power like this in your chainsaw, and the blade is kind of just spinning like this. And you'll notice that the chain, it's just not making very good progress into that log that you're trying to cut. So make sure you always remember to knock down those rakers as well. Now, with this said, this should give most people the basic knowledge of what it takes to sharpen a chainsaw. Let me break this down for you. Always remember that with most chainsaws nowadays, if you have a Husqvarna or a Steel, start out with a 3/16 file for the first 5 to 7 sharpens. Once you do that, switch to a 7/32 because the spacing on that tooth is most likely going to be big enough to where that will fit in there. Examine your teeth very carefully. Make sure you are not stopping until that tooth is 100% squared off completely. You do not want round teeth at all whatsoever. It's not going to do you any good. Even if it takes 50, 60, 70, 80 strokes, just suck it up and do it. Okay? Then remember that if you are sharpening your chainsaw and it's not filing down the tooth very well, the file's probably bad. So make sure you have plenty of files. And then last, always make sure you're going to be hitting your Rakers with a flathead file every single time you sharpen your chainsaw. And that should give you guys enough incentive to be able to sharpen a chainsaw, maybe not masterfully, but enough basic knowledge to where it can boost your confidence to get out there and to kick some serious butt behind a chainsaw and to not have to worry anymore when you are sharpening. So that's it, you guys. Thank you for watching.